Hey everyone, this is Mike Banner with the latest episode of 62 Who Knew, the podcast. The successor to 62 Who Knew, the television show. I always start out with a little brief explanation of what 62 Who Knew is for people joining us for the first time. And our audience in the last couple of months has grown from the hundreds to the thousands. We're very proud of that, and we hope soon it's the tens of thousands and beyond. But let me give you just a little brief synopsis of what prompted us to create 62 Who Knew and why it appears to have touched a nerve in the country, because it's something we all go through. 62 Who Knew is about the double-edged sword of longer lifespans. And it certainly is a double-edged sword. According to the latest polls, and you have so many different polls, the one that I looked at most recently is from Social Security. And it says that if you're a man, and if you make it to 62 years old in this country, and it doesn't say make it healthy, just make it to your 62nd birthday, you have better than a 35% chance of making it to 92. If you're a woman and you make it to 62 in this country, you have a little more than a 50% chance of making it to 92. So 62, who knew that you have another 30 years left on this planet if you take good care of yourself? And we all know with the way the country is going today, and that's not a view or a negative or a positive comment, but with the price of gas, the price of eggs, oh my God, eggs, and everything else that we talk about on a constant level throughout the country, making it those last 30 years in a quality of life. Well, it's one thing to live to be 92. It's one thing to enjoy to being 92. And our age group, that includes our guests today that I'll be introducing in a minute. And we're the baby boomers. I'm on the older section side of the baby boomers. We have a different hurdle, many different hurdles, but one especially, to look at when it comes to quality of life, when it comes to retirement. Our parents and their parents all ask the same questions. Do we need our life insurance still? Should we pay off our house? We did pay off our house. Was that smart? Do we need major medical insurance? What age do you get Medicare supplemental policy? After all, I have another 10, 15 years to go here. Well, our group, the baby boomers, have all those same questions. But the odds are good that we're going to be here for 30 years. And that's what makes the double-edged sword of longer lifespan so touchy in this country. And I can tell you from the scientists and medical experts that we've had on 62 Who Knew, the medical breakthroughs and scientific explorations of the last 20, 30 years are going to be dwarfed in the next 20, 30 years. That was Fred Flintstone compared to what's coming. Living to be 100 or 110 years old in the next couple of decades in this country is going to be common with quality of life. But America is not prepared for that, financially or emotionally. That's what 62 Who Knew is here for. It's here to help you solve those problems with expert, actionable advice, which leads us to today's very special guest that I've known for years. It's probably going on about 8 years, introduced by one of my legendary friends, Peter Gelbwax. I think if I didn't know Peter Gelbwax, I might be sitting home in a closet going, I think I want to do a podcast. Peter has introduced me to the most incredible national players in the elder retirement world that there are. Thank you, Peter. He always watches the show. But I'd like to introduce you today to Mr. Howard S. Krooks, a former president of the National Elder Law Attorneys Association of America, an association that helps, God knows, hundreds of thousands or millions of seniors. I said to Howard just before we went on air, your bio reads like Jack Nicholson's, resume right before he's going to get an award at the Academy Awards. And he said, please don't read that. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to give information. So I'm going to leave it as you are the ex-president of the Elder Law Attorneys Association of America, and that you are at the top of your field, and that you do as much, if not more, to help people than anybody I've ever met. So welcome, Howard, to 62 Who Knew.
Thank you very much, Michael. I will just add one thing. My areas of practice take me to New York, Florida, and Pennsylvania. That's where I practice, those three jurisdictions. So I thought your guests should know that.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm going to ask you something that I think is the burning question for almost all 62 Who Knew members viewers and the expert of the week. Do you really have to be wealthy to have an elder law attorney? I don't have that much. I have equity in my house and I have a little life insurance. Do I need an elder law attorney? Give us the very blunt answer to that question in today's complicated estate tax world.
Well, I'll answer that question by telling you that I don't have a minimum for anybody who comes to me and says, I have some assets and I'd like to make sure that I'm doing proper planning to cover myself for long-term care needs and also achieve some measure of asset protection. So if you wanted to just take the most simple example of, let's say somebody has a house and it's fully paid for, they don't have much in the way of financial assets. I have clients who have homes and they want to make sure that the home, which for most people is the most substantial asset, is protected. And so my answer is, if it's not obvious, it doesn't really matter because wealth is relative. If you have an asset to protect and you're trying to plan for your long-term care, there are usually things that an elder law attorney can do to help you to preserve those assets and qualify for government assistance.
That is the answer that we were expecting. And I think it's a surprise answer to the mass of America who goes, well, I never thought I needed an attorney. Believe me, you do, and your children will wish, or your heirs will wish you had one after you leave this planet. They will wish you took care of this.
And let me just add, if you had very little assets, there's still something called incapacity planning or disability planning, where you name people to handle your affairs, even though you may not have much in the way of assets. You still have personal affairs that need to be addressed, even to a lesser extent, financial, Social Security income, payment of bills. So you could have power of attorney for that. And then on the healthcare side, if a healthcare decision needs to be made. So it's just not the end of the inquiry. Does everybody really need, and am I wealthy enough to need the services of an elder law attorney? The realities are, as human beings, I think the answer is yes, we all need to think about these issues.
Yeah, and it's an emotional topic. And sometimes that's what stops people. I think it's the same with the use of home equity. It's the same with long-term care insurance. I know that day is coming, but I don't really want to have that conversation right now. And I think that stops a lot of people from doing the planning when they need to do the planning.
I'm sure that it does. As you and I probably both know, thinking of it in that way is not going to make the problem go away. In fact, quite the contrary. If you step into it and you embrace it, then you're actually giving a gift to not only yourself, but also your family members who are going to have to clean up the mess if you don't do planning.
Yeah, there's no doubt. One of our favorite guests and one of my favorite speakers on this and other topics, Miss Kathy Sigorski, who's an elder law attorney, one of the things that she taught me, and it stuck with me forever, is that an elder law attorney helps you while you're alive. An estate attorney helps you when you're dead. She said, I'm not putting down estate attorneys, Michael, but that's their job. Their service comes into play when your eyes close for the last time. Your elder law attorney is to help you while you're still alive. And that's always stuck with me when she said that on the television show.
Yeah, it's good advice.
All right, now, elder law coordination. There's so much to that again, the average person, just doesn't realize the risks they take every day. I don't care if they're 22 years old, let alone an old guy like me. Tell us a little bit about elder care coordination. It's so important.
Right. So I think that for the average person who is confronted with care needs of a loved one for the very first time, they're in for a lot of surprises and uncharted waters that make it very difficult to navigate if you don't have somebody with some type of background in coordinating the care needs of this relative of yours, this person that you love so much. There are so many issues that present immediately. For example, if somebody is hospitalized and you're being told that they need to go into a skilled nursing facility as a next logical step, how do you choose which facility and which facility best meets the needs of my loved one? How are we going to pay for this facility? What Medicare coverage is there available to cover, and how long will it last? If you get 100 days of coverage under Medicare, can the facility tell you that the person has maxed out on their improvement from the rehab services that are being provided and thus drop the person from Medicare coverage. If you have people coming into your home, there's care coordination in your home. Who's coordinating the aides? What happens if an aide that was supposed to come doesn't come at the stated time and you have no coverage and you need coverage because you're off on your way to work? Who's managing the medication regimen? Who's coordinating between all the different doctors that are prescribing medications to make sure that they're all talking to each other? Because typically, doctors prescribe and they may not be aware of all the other medications that you're taking, or whether or not there are negative consequences of taking two types of medication together. There are transportation needs that need to be coordinated. There's scheduling of appointments that needs to be coordinated. There are mobility devices that may be needed. There might be home assessments that need to be done to make sure that your home is safe. I mean, the list goes on and on.
It just goes on and on.
And for families that are dealing with this for the very first time, to say that it is overwhelming is an understatement.
Yeah, it's daunting.
What you then have to do is you then have to go around to all the facilities to find out which one is going to be the best placement. You then have to go and find out who's going to come to the home and figure out how to retrofit the home given the person's disabilities and needs and functional limitations. And every time you have to do anything, you first have to do the research and find out who's going to help you do what you need to do. And you don't even know if they're reliable. So then you start reaching out to friends and you say, hey, have you had this situation? Can you recommend somebody where I can do this or that? The elder care coordinator has done this hundreds of times over for many other families. They have built relationships in the larger community, your local community, so that when you ask a question and say, I need help with X, the answer is, oh yeah, I've done that many times. And I have 3 to 5 relationships with people that might be able to help you, solve that problem. So the elder care coordination piece is so significant, Michael, that we're actually going to be bringing it into my law firm, where the clients who come to see us are going to be able to also take advantage of the services of an elder care coordinator. So we're working on that project right now. That's how significant the demand is for this type of service.
May I ask a question? Because that's an incredible service. I know you mentioned that you are practicing in 3 states, Florida, New York, and Pennsylvania. The elder care coordination, would you have to be licensed in all of the states to offer that coordination? Or is that outside the legal purview enough that you possibly could offer that coordination in all 50 states if people came to you?
Well, so it is,
struck me.
Yeah, right. So certainly people need to be licensed, right, in the state where they're practicing. Conceivably, we could do it anywhere that the person is licensed, but we would probably only do it in offices where we also have elder law practitioners such as myself, so that we can work with and supervise, because it's really the joining of legal and care coordination services. You really can't have one without the other is the approach and the theory of all this. A lawyer cannot just address the legal needs, and a care coordinator can not just address the care coordination needs without there being some crossover and efforts that are made to coordinate both of those disciplines
Right.
in under one roof. So that's the reason why you're going to see probably more and more. And there are some law firms that do it now. And as I said, we're about to offer that service here.
Before we move, I have one more question on elder care coordination, then we're going to move on to so many topics. As I said, I already know, and I hope you'll come back and join us again. We have no shot of covering the important topics that you help families with. But let me just, before we ask one more question, remind our viewers, this is 62 Who Knew. We are here today with Mr. Howard Krooks, the ex-president of the Elder Law Attorney Association of America. He has his finger on the pulse of that segment of society, and we're so happy to have him. And we're talking about the need to work with an elder law attorney. We have talked about that an elder law attorney helps you when you're alive. The estate attorney helps you when you're dead. And we were just talking about the many things of the elder care coordination. I have one question about that, and then we're going to move on. Is part of elder care coordination also assigning which one of your relatives to take care of things? Because I've noticed as I got older and all of my friends dealt with losing their parents, mine have been gone for quite some time, that among the loss and the love and the frustration, or even they're still with us but needing care, who gets to make that decision? Well, I think dad would have wanted this. Yeah, but mom told me this when I was 18. But is part of elder law coordination identifying the proper family member to make these decisions?
Sure, it can be. And certainly, since legal documents are where you put your wishes in writing in that regard. So the lawyer will prepare the documents. And as an elder law attorney, I've worked with clients for many years now in talking through with them who would be the best choice to name in your documents. And it may not always be the same person for healthcare decision making as it would be for financial decision making, because
That's right.
your children may have different skill sets and strengths, and you want to maximize those when it comes to your care needs. If you don't reduce your wishes to writing in so-called advanced directives, these are the general group of documents that cover such things as durable power of attorney, healthcare proxy, living will, a HIPAA representative document, and who do you want to serve as your guardian if anybody ever commences a guardian proceeding for you. If you don't do that, you're really leaving it to the other relatives to step forward in a crisis scenario, by the way,
Yeah.
and saying, I'm the one that dad or mom would have wanted, or I want to have the control, and somebody else disagrees. And now you've got people going in opposite directions. Meanwhile, you're there, and either your personal being or your finances are suffering while other people are arguing over who should be in charge.
Like you said, at the worst possible time when your nerves are at the, that high tip of everything. All right, next topic, which we always seem to get back to on all 9 shows that we've done and on most of the 125 shows, which is long-term care planning and / long-term care insurance. The first month of the show, I actually had some close friends who watched the show and said, Mike, I love the show, but is this really 62 Who Knew? Or is this the long-term care insurance show? Because we seem to, no matter what we talk about, financial planning, annuities versus CDs, in-home care, long-term care insurance, whatever we talk to, elder law preparation, it always seems to get back to people need long-term care insurance. And again, the fallacy in that great industry, I think like in yours as well, is that long-term care insurance is too expensive for the masses. That's for the rich. That is totally untrue. I'm just going to say it. The long-term care insurance industry as a whole has not done a good job on presenting their case to America the last 30 or 40 years. It's been the product of the elite, but it shouldn't be. It should be the product of the masses. Tell us how you feel long-term care planning / insurance, fits into this.
So I'll start by telling all of your listeners that I have long-term care insurance. So when I say that, I suggest that you do too. I'm not just giving you a line. I'm telling you that it was important enough for me, realizing what all of my clients have gone through, that I wanted to know that I had the safety and security of a policy that covers me should the need arise. And I think that speaks to what you were saying, Michael, as far as the industry and maybe what kind of job it's done in communicating to consumers. The problem with the traditional policies that I saw is that you don't know if you're ever going to need it. Now, there are statistics out there that tell you that, 2 out of 3 people are going to end up needing long-term care, but that's really not carrying the day in the consumer public. There's still that chance that you won't need it. And there's also the fact that it could be so far off in years that, there's not the immediacy. So I think that was the PR problem that the industry faced. And I think it's largely been resolved by these so-called hybrid products or long-term care riders to life insurance approaches, because then the consumer can look at it and say, I am adding to my estate through life insurance, so my heirs get to benefit, even if I don't use a day of this policy for long-term care. But if the need arises, then I know I'm covered. And let me give you some reasons why I think you should seriously consider doing it. In fact, I think it should be mandatory for everybody, the way auto insurance is. And we did have many years ago the Class Act, where the federal government tried to make it mandatory, where people would buy in, similar to the concept of Social Security, but it never passed. But the reason why it should be is that Medicaid is the only government program that is designed to cover the cost of long-term care. Medicaid has stringent financial eligibility requirements. In the state of Florida, you can't have more than $2,000. Most states are at that level. Some might be a little bit more. That's a very small amount of assets. That's number one. So you got to deal with the fact that your assets are an impediment to qualifying for Medicaid. Now, there's planning that you can do. That's true. But the planning that we do, which would be an irrevocable trust, frankly, works very well if you have long-term care insurance, because if you have long-term care insurance that covers you for the 5-year look-back period, then guess what? You don't have to worry about being blocked from Medicaid for those 5 years. So you get your policy, you do your trust, you're covered for 5 years, and then after that, you can qualify for Medicaid. So you kind of have the best of both worlds.
Best of both worlds.
But the other thing that I want to say on this topic is that choice. Choice is very important, where you're going to go and how much you can afford. And if you're not self-sufficient and you can't self-insure, and you're going to have millions of dollars in assets to be able to do that, if you are residing at home, for example, and you need 24/7 caregiving at home, easily that's going to cost $240,000 a year, $20,000 a month, okay? If you have $1 million, then you can afford to do that for what? 4 years. But if you need
4 years and 1 month.
right. But if you need it longer than that, then what is going to happen after that? You will have enjoyed being able to stay in your own home, but then when the money runs out, you'll be forced institutionalization into a nursing home under Medicaid, where you go from one-on-one caregiving at home to one staff person to 20, 21, or 22 people on a floor at a nursing home. Good luck with making that transition. So to my way of looking at this, by purchasing long-term care insurance, which let's say it costs, if you get it early enough, it could cost just under 10 grand or 10 grand a year, 10 grand a year versus $20,000 a month. Now you tell me which one's more expensive or less expensive. The difference and the psychological component that gets in the way for most people is you're being asked to pay now for something that you don't need, and you hope you never do. That's
right.
why it's so difficult, and that's why it's such an uphill climb for the industry, because convincing people to do something that they don't know if they're ever going to use it, it's a tough sell.
Yeah, it's like you said a few sentences ago. It's funny, we don't have a choice with car insurance. We hope we're never going to get into a car accident, but we have that insurance, and when we have the car accident, we are so glad that we have it. Now, we don't have an option. We're forced to get car insurance. But you mentioned a few things that, again, when we're using the new products, the hybrid products, which is life insurance with a long-term care rider, it's win-win. First of all, you get a multiple, as you know, of your life insurance and your long-term care insurance. If you never use it, thank God you never used it. You still increased your estate value with tax-free money to your children. I want to go to another thing that, you had mentioned that a great policy for $20,000 a month, could be $10,000 a year. And quite frankly, I'm a mortgage guy, that. $10,000 a year is $833.33 a month. And some people might look at that and go, look, that's rough today. I'm 50-something years old. I'm still healthy, but I have one daughter that's getting divorced. I have another son moving back into the house, and that could be rough. I have had associates price out long-term care insurance policies through our website, because this is what we're about, not just bringing on great guests like you, but putting people a click away from an expert that solves this problem. Not just, okay, thanks for watching us today, bye-bye. We want to solve these problems. I'm seeing policies that pay out $6,000, maybe $7,000 a month for less than $250 a month. And granted, when you're thinking $20,000 a month, that is incredible. But there are many people that are going to need unskilled help, maybe 8 hours a day. There are going to be people that need help 2 or 3 times a week, and $5,000 or $6,000 a month. That goes a long way to a quality of life, especially when you don't have $1 million in the bank. So I think there are less expensive options out there. Your input to that one?
Well, listen, you have to shop around the policies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to figure out, with all the bells and whistles, what are you going to pay for and what are you going to forego? You do have some element of control over your premiums at the outset.
That's
By
right.
the way, talking about premiums, one of the problems with the traditional policies, of course, are these class-wide adjustments, right? This is your premium, and we can't change it unless we change it for the entire class. And then you get a notice from the insurance company, and it says, guess what? We got class-wide assurance approval to up your premium. So you have a choice. Either you pay the higher amount, which you weren't planning for, now you're not really set up for, right? Or you have to lower the daily benefit amount that you originally had. That's a very difficult position to put a consumer, anybody in. And that's why I kind of like these hybrid policies where you decide upon a total amount that you're going to buy the insurance for. And there's not an exact science in figuring that out. But this way, your premiums are locked in and you won't have to deal with some of the stuff that's gone on with the traditional policies.
You also mentioned two words, or maybe it's one hyphenated word. I'm not sure. I'm a mortgage guy. I'm not an English teacher. Self-insured. If you have $1 million in the bank and you're going to spend $20,000 a month, that is exactly 4 years and 1 month and you run out of money. And those two words, self-insured, have always driven me crazy as a financial person. And I've heard other long-term care experts talk about it as well. There's no such thing as self-insurance. You're simply saying you're taking the risk and I'll pay the bill. The definition of insurance is mitigating risk. You're not saying, self-insuring makes people think like, wow, there is some protection back there. No, there's your bank account. That's what there's, So there's no insurance.
We're talking about the same thing with a slightly different spin, but the point being that, look, I wouldn't argue necessarily with somebody who says, I have $10 million in the bank. And if I need long-term care, I think I can generate enough returns that'll pay for 24/7 caregiving, $240,000 a year without dipping into principal. And I'd say, you know what? I think you're right.
You're right.
So you want to call that self-insuring, you want to call it private pay, whatever you want to call it. The point is really not necessarily for me the moniker that we're using, but whether or not you have sufficient resources to pay for the needed care without causing a serious hole in your estate. And if you don't mind that your estate suffers even along the way on the long-term care continuum, then that gives you even more money to play with, because not only are you looking at your returns, you're also willing to dip into principal if it's necessary to give yourself the high level quality of care that you so richly deserve.
Yeah, and I know how you feel about certain things. We come from a very similar world. I'm here to help the masses. Okay, so if you have that $5, $8, $10 million portfolio, you're in the top 2% of the country, and God love you. You don't need our help. The other 98% of us, we need that help, which is why I think the message that you're delivering right now, resounds with the great majority of the country. In fact, 98% of the country. The other thing that I always want to mention also, probably my favorite long-term care insurance speakers. My favorite, yes, Bill Comfort. Do you know the name by any chance?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Bill is just listening to Bill talk about long-term care insurance is like going to a poetry reading and having a poet read he's such an eloquent and emotional speaker. Again, introduced to me almost 15 years ago by Peter Gelbwaks. I was speaking at one of the national long-term care conventions about the use of home equity, reverse mortgages, to pay for long-term care insurance. I was done with my spiel, and Peter took me, put his arm around me and said, "Come on, I want you to hear something." I go, "What's that?" He goes, "You think you're a speaker? I'm going to introduce you to somebody that makes you look like Milt Tillis, like you. Oh God, that's an old reference. Our younger people don't even know who that was. That was a great country singer for you people below the age of 50 who stuttered when he spoke, but not when he sang. It was kind of unbelievable. So, too old of a reference maybe for some of our younger baby boomers. And I went, okay. As a speaker, you got to listen to another speaker. Okay. And at the end of the hour, I just went, oh my God, you're right. I thought I was the speaker. This is the real thing. And I have been fairly enamored with Bill Comfort for the last 15 years. And he said something about, he always says this a lot in writing, that there are studies out there that say 2 out of 3 Americans are going to have a long-term care event, 80% of Americans, 30% of Americans. I remember the first time I heard him say this to a huge crowd. He went, look, this is what it is. It's 50-50. You're either going to need it or you're not going to need it. There is no other math. You're either going to need it or you're not going to need it. You're going to be prepared for it or you're not. Again, one of those pearls of wisdom from Bill Comfort that stuck with me for 15 years. All right. You mentioned an irrevocable trust. Most of my guests, legal, not legal, medical, insurance, have always leaned towards revocable trusts because they're revocable. You can change your mind. You're the first person in a number of episodes to bring up irrevocable. So tell us the layman's difference. I mean, the words themselves tell us the difference, but the dangers and or advantages to one or the other. Sure. Irrevocable towards revocable.
Sure. So I'm going to start with the revocable, if that's okay. So
yes,
people like revocable trusts for two reasons. One, it avoids probate. What is probate? You got to submit the will to the probate court, has to be approved. A fiduciary needs to be appointed and approved by the court. And in some states like Florida, there's a 3-month publication period where you have to publish notice of death consecutively for 2 weeks and a newspaper of wide distribution. And then you have to wait 3 months while creditors can see the notice, come forward and say, you owe us money. Your estate owes us money. And that causes delay. Another aspect of probate that is not favored in states which it takes a long time. New York is another state that takes a really long time. I've got states that take 9 to 12 months to process. Forget about 4 to 6 months. And so if you own real property and you have a buyer and you're hung up in probate, you can't even sell. You got to hope that you get a really nice buyer who says, I really want the property, I'll wait, or you're going to lose the buyer. So if you had done a trust, known as a revocable trust, then you don't have to worry about those kinds of things. And it's just a more streamlined way to manage the assets after death. And so that's a very desirable thing. And that's why people do it. But the other reason why people do them is for incapacity planning. So if you have all your assets underneath one umbrella and you have a successor trustee named, the minute you become incapacitated, that person doesn't have to go to all the various banks and financial institutions, present themselves and present a document called a power of attorney and say, hey, I am the power of attorney. I need to do X, Y, and Z, and I need to do it yesterday. And all of a sudden they want to tell you they have to send it to their legal compliance department. It's going to take 3 to 5 days and you're, hurry up and I gotta, and then you find out after 3 to 5 days, well, we have a problem with this or that. And now we're not going to honor the power of attorney. So by setting it up as a trust account from day one, the bank has already said that they're going to recognize so-and-so as the successor trustee, and it makes the incapacity component of this also much more fluid and streamlined. So the revocable trust, what you need to know on the negative side, if it is a negative, is that your assets in the revocable trust are fully countable for Medicaid purposes. So if you're trying to achieve less than $2,000 in assets or whatever your state limit is on assets, you're not accomplishing that by signing a revocable trust and putting your assets into that revocable trust. And I can't tell you how many clients over the years have walked in very proudly with a nice binder with all their documents prepared by lawyer so-and-so. And they say, I already have a trust. Why do I need you? I open up the binder. I see that right there on the first page, this trust is revocable. I can revoke it at any time. I can modify it. I could amend it. I could do whatever I want. Well, guess what? If you can do whatever you want when you apply for Medicaid with assets in a revocable trust, what do you think the Medicaid agency is going to say upon receiving your application? Oh, I see you have $500,000 in a revocable trust. Why don't you just spend that down? It's available.
Yeah.
It's countable, right? To be contrasted with the irrevocable trust, which you do not have the ability to amend, modify, nor do you have the ability, frankly, to just withdraw the money. And that is the difference. You are giving up control over the assets. And because you gave up control, when it comes time to apply for Medicaid, you can legitimately say, my only assets are in this one checking account. It's about a $1,500 balance. I don't own all the assets that 5+ years ago I put into an irrevocable trust. I'm not a beneficiary of that trust. Okay, so that's the difference. You have to be willing to say, long-term care planning is so important to me, and it's too late for me if you don't have long-term care insurance, or let's say you do, but it's not as comprehensive as you'd like. Let's say you didn't get the inflation rider. so now you're stuck at $250 a day, but now it costs $500 a day, then you can say, I'm going to put whatever assets I have into an irrevocable trust, wait out the 5-year look back period. And after that, you get to apply for Medicaid and you get to qualify because they won't count the assets in a properly drafted irrevocable trust. So that's the difference between the two.
What a country. That's what I'm going to say to that explanation. What a country. You know, one of the things that I know would make you aghast as an attorney is how many times when I'm doing a reverse mortgage, and it hasn't happened that many times, but it's happened enough to make me go, wow, where I'm in the process of doing a mortgage for somebody, reverse or regular. And, you know, do you have a trust? Yes. We want this house to be in our trust and we want the mortgage to be in the trust. That's no problem. We do reverse mortgages and trusts all the time. But I do need a copy of your trust to send to my legal department. Oh, no problem. They send a copy of the trust and I open it. And there's just nothing in it. I mean, there's a beautiful cover page that says Mr. and Mrs. John Smith, trust, da-da-da-da-da, their address, their birthday. So I'll email back and go, no, I think you sent me the cover page. I need the actual trust, what's in it. And they'll go, well, what do you mean? I mean, we went to trust.com and we paid $137 and we filled in the information and that's what we got. I go, but there's nothing in it. Where's the house or the CDs or any? Oh, we do that? I go, well, yeah, when you use trust.com for $90 and not an elder law attorney. But can you imagine that, God forbid, and I'm sure it happens, you know, they leave this planet, their children think everything is fine. They think mom and dad had a trust and they present this empty thing. And then the state goes wild.
Michael, I've had clients walk in very proudly displaying this trust. And when I ask them where the assets are, they give me the statements and they're all individually titled. They're not in the name of the trust. So trust funding is a whole separate thing that it's so important to do that I know that there are some attorneys that will just draft the trust and explain in a letter to the clients, here's what you got to do. I won't do that. I will work with my clients until the very last asset that is desired to be placed in the trust, and you've got to send me the statement to show that you changed it, because what's the point of doing all the work on drafting the most beautiful trust on the planet if, as you say, it's empty, it's unfunded?
Yeah, and I hope trust.com doesn't watch this and sue me. I'm not mad at trust.com. Can you as an attorney give me a legal disclosure, please? I'm not mad at trust.com. I'm sure your disclosures said you have to put things in the trust. I'm sure you're doing it right, trust.com. That's all I need is is to be sued by trust.com, not putting them down. It's just unbelievable. I mean, it's almost like, you're going in for surgery, and the doctor goes, look, I'm going to explain how to do this. Here's the scalpel. You do it, okay? Because I got to go. It's amazing. I mean, and I've gone through it in my family. I mean, when one of my grandfathers died, now we're going back a long time, but he was just a great man, provided for his children, provided for his grandchildren, great-grandpa, Papa Irving. But when he passed away, he never had the inclination to have financial, or legal advice. He didn't need it. I have a little stock. I have a little this. I have a little that. And what his daughters, my mom and her and my aunt, her sister, went through for several months. Nobody was starving. Nobody needed to get grandpa's money to go to Publix to buy food. But what the daughters went through, because Papa Irving just didn't take the time to talk to a lawyer. He would have if he would have known him. His heart was unbelievable. But people today still don't know it. And people today are more complicated. It gets back to longer lifespan, 62, who knew, yada, yada, yada. When Grandpa died, he had a Ford Belvedere. It was in the 70s. It was probably worth what one of the tires on my car is worth. But be that as it may, today people are dying with $90,000 cars and $80,000 SUVs and small 401ks or maybe sizable IRAs, because we're not a country of pensions anymore. We are a country of 401ks and IRAs. That is for sure, which brings us to the next topic that I know is your expertise. I learned so much from my guests. I mean, I go on other podcasts, I talk about things. Oh, wow, you have a breadth of knowledge. And no, I really don't. I'm good at a couple of things, and I learn from my guests that I bring on. The negative effect on a 401k or an IRA to a spouse when their spouse passes on and they didn't do the proper paperwork or documentation to make sure that the surviving spouse can get the the financial benefits of their 401k or IRA are devastating. And I just learned that over the last few months. Can you touch on that?
Well, sure. You never want to make an IRA or retirement account payable to an estate, because that accelerates the withdrawal of the money from the account, and it doesn't allow you to achieve a rollover or a stretch of the money over the lifetime. There's only certain people these days that can still get a lifetime stretch versus a 10-year stretch. But the point that you're making is also a carryover from what we were saying before. You were talking about your grandfather and he didn't plan, and your mom and her sister had to deal with all of that. All of these things are best encapsulated with the following in mind. You had a saying that really resonated with you. This always resonates with me. If you love your kids, okay, then the greatest gift you can give them is through the planning that you do to make their lives easier after you're gone. Because the mess that you are in and you just don't know it, and however you leave your finances, they're the ones who will have to clean them up. Now, look, if you don't like your kids, then by all means, you can purposely do nothing and you can have my blessing.
Yes.
For those people who do love their kids and who actually want to give them the greatest gift of all, it is doing the planning so that they have to do very little after you're gone. And I firmly believe that. And that encapsulates IRA planning and making sure that you're choosing beneficiaries that you want to receive the assets, that you're not leaving it open-ended with no beneficiary designation, in which case it would be payable to the estate with an accelerated payout rate. Definitely, you're going to want to make sure you meet with an advisor and select beneficiaries and name them. Can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients and I talk to them about the importance of naming beneficiaries on these retirement accounts, and they say, yes, 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 Howie, I've taken care of it. It's all covered. And I say, okay. And you provide me with the written beneficiary designations. And can you also verify that in the records of the company, that's who you've designated? Not just you have a piece of paper where you wrote it down, right? You had a phone call one day, but there's a document that's been submitted, it's acknowledged, submitted, and it's according to the records of the company. Because if you don't produce that for me, I'm not 100% buying into this designation. And I can't tell you how many times when people say to me, I got it covered, and then they go and they do this due diligence that I asked them to do, something comes up that they're like, oh my God, I was 100% that I did it across all my retirement accounts, but I found one where there was none. So very important. Can't be too careful.
All right, before we move on to the next, and before I do another quick, break to tell who people are and why we're here, I do want to tell you that what you encapsulated, I wrote it down as quick as I can. I may have to have you email it because I love what you said. It is deep. And I think you and I, we can get away with this. I'm not sure I could get away with this with most of my guests, but one landsman to another, that was the ultimate Jewish guilt trip I've ever heard in my life on my podcast. I think our mothers would be proud of us, Howie. I think they're looking down on us right now going, my Howie, he did good. But it's the truth. You know what I'm saying? It is the truth. And from one landsman to another, I felt it. I might want to put this on the podcast. I might want to put this on the website. I mean, I believe it. What you said is true. It is the greatest gift you can give because, you get to a certain age, and I'm past that age, where you start to lose your older uncles and obviously your first your grandparents go. Your grandparents were old when you were born. Let's face it, they were grandma and grandpa. I've said for many years, this will be another show entirely. I don't think you know what loss really is until you lose a parent. Uh-huh. Okay? And then you learn what loss is. But I've gone through and watched my friends gone through, and now that my cousins and I were the oldest aunts and uncles left, I see what people have gone through in my family with loving parents who cared for them, but they just weren't prepared. So again, we're at 62 Who Knew podcast. Our guest today is Mr. Howard Krooks, a national expert on elder law care of all things, a man with his finger on the pulse of that topic throughout the country. We're going to talk about one other thing. This hour goes by so quickly. We still have time. We talked about family conflict issues, that this is the worst time to have them, so we need to do that up front. But I do want to talk about guardianship, because there are times when I do get a call in my little part of the world, Michael, oh my God, we need a reverse mortgage for mom. You know, she's in a home we want to keep her at home and it's $6,000 a month or $8,000 a month. She's got a $500,000 house free and clear. Let's do a reverse mortgage and we'll be able to afford the in-home care for years to come. Oh my God, that's so great. You know, we got to get mom on a counseling call. I got to get mom, to take an application. Oh, she can't do that, Michael. She's in and out of it. Well, is your name on the house? No. Do you have a durable power of attorney to make this decision for mom? No. Well, then there's not a mortgage banker in the world that can do any mortgage, let alone a reverse mortgage for mom if she's incapacitated. Well, what do we got to do? We need the money and we can't pay the nurses. Well, we'll have to get you a guardianship. And that's just not easy. And well, maybe it is easy, but it's so time consuming. But meanwhile, the decisions have to be made now and the nurses need to be paid on Friday. So let's talk about guardianship for a second. And again, the greatness of having it and the terribleness of not having it when the family needs it.
Okay. I'm going to start out with another reference.
Okay.
Do you recall the cash lanes that they used to have before they had pay by mail and they just took a picture?
Yes.
Okay. So going back decades now, when Easy Pass came out in New York, right? And now, you have SunPass down in Florida. But I used to wonder as I was going through any toll, there's the Easy Pass and everybody's just sailing through. And then there's this long line of cars in 2 or 3 lanes for people who are waiting to pay cash. And every single time I saw that, I thought to myself, I don't understand. Do you have any less time in a day, a week, a month than I do? Why don't you have an Easy Pass? Okay. The analogy now comes full circle on guardianship. You can avoid guardianship by simply signing advance directives. All you have to do is take the time, get them prepared, and you decide who gets to serve to handle your financial needs or your healthcare needs. So why would you be without the Easy Pass? So that's my first answer to your question, but guardianship does exist for a reason, and it's because there are people who don't do that. And the people who don't do that find themselves in guardianship court because they have to go to the court and say, I don't have the ability to make legal decisions for my loved one. And for that reason, you, the guardianship court, can confer such authority on me. But in order to do that, I got to hire a lawyer. I got to file papers in court. I got to pay third parties who are appointed by the court to examine my loved one and submit written reports to the court. So there's more money there. There are court filing fees, more money there. Public disclosure of your loved one's finances and circumstances. And okay, so now I gave you the bad part up front. So now that you understand what's involved and that you can avoid it, let's get to the part that is positive. If you don't have anything in place and you need to make decisions for other people, there's a mechanism that does allow you to do that. It's called guardianship. And as long as it's uncontested, it's not so terrible. It just takes time. It could take 4 to 6 weeks, could take longer. There are usually emergency remedy provisions in most, if not all, states' guardianship statutes, where if you have to make a decision in the next 24 to 48 hours, you'll be able to get before a judge and you'll be able to be appointed the emergency temporary guardian for that purpose. But it is a lot of stress. You're already in crisis mode. People are already putting pressure on you as a family member without decision-making authority to do something. And it's a lot for any family to have to go through. Let me also add that once the guardian is appointed, there are both initial reports that have to be filed and annual reports that must be filed. So there's paperwork that goes along with serving as guardian. There's education requirements. So you have to sit for usually something like an 8-hour training course in one day. So guardianship is good as a last alternative, as a last resort. It can be very helpful. But my advice would be for all of your listeners, if you take the time to sign your advance directives, there are a few reasons that will still warrant a guardianship having to be brought. And those usually involve that the power of attorney wasn't broadly drafted enough, and so you don't really have the authority that you thought you have, or a circumstance where there's family conflict. And even though you do have advance directives in place, somebody is challenging your authority and trying to intervene and exercise their own authority. Maybe you have conflicting powers of attorney, and there are two people that are trying to act at the same time, so the guardianship court can resolve that circumstance. So guardianship is out there. You need to know it's out there. In my opinion, if you can avoid it, you should.
Good. Medical directives again. Well, we're coming to the end of this 62 Who Knew episode. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I hope you will join us again. I hope you will be one of our semi-regulars to bring your wisdom to our ever-growing audience. The 62 Who Knew website seems to be being updated every week because of new things that are happening. One of the things that I'm looking forward to having on there is a reference, a link to the Elder Law Attorneys of America site.
Let me just clarify, Michael, if I may. If anybody's looking to go to that site, it's the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys.
That's right, yeah.
And so that's what you would Google, and you'll find that site, and they have an attorney locator. So whatever state you're looking to find an attorney in that does elder law, you can find an elder law attorney in your town, in your county, whatever.
I want to talk to you, off screen about how we could do something official to make this a tool for our viewers.
Okay.
And then maybe we, obviously in Florida, New York, and Pennsylvania, the only name that'll come up will be yours. No, that's not true. I know that's not allowed. But in my mind, that would be true. I want to thank you for doing what you did. We're going to, for doing what you did today. To me, it's always amazing that some of the deepest decisions about our lives, financially, medically, really do boil down to emotion. And we really touched on that a lot today. And we touch a lot about it when we talk about long-term care insurance. And emotion stops people from making decisions. Emotion makes people make decisions too quickly and too rashly. It is important to make these decisions before your emotions are at a peak. And in many cases, at that point, it's too late. It's now in the state's hands. It's up to laws and regulations. So we appreciate you being here so much. Thank you so much, my friend, for doing this. I do want to talk to you off air in the next few days about doing something official with the association so it can be a resource for all the 62 Who Knew viewers. Thank you so much. I'm going to make a few more announcements, but thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you having me.
P.F. Chang's and Boca beef and broccoli soon.
You got it. You don't have.
Okay, that's our normal meeting place for those of you that ever want. If you'd like to meet Howie and get his autograph, it's lunchtime at P.F. Chang's. We've had a few good meetings there, which is where all good Jewish boys go to a Chinese restaurant. Let's just make sure we know that for sure. Thank you so much. Let me give you a few announcements about what's coming up. We are so happy to announce another national sponsor in the 62 Who Knew family, Ms. Diane Daniels, the founder and host of Medicare Nation, one of the top Medicare podcasts in the country. And I have had the pleasure of knowing Diane for years now. She was on the 62 Who Knew television show several times. And in fact, on a night that I was ill and could not be there, Diane was one of three people in 3 years that I trusted to host 62 Who Knew. That's how I trust this woman. But her knowledge on Medicare and the changes that are happening and that have been happening, which are not necessarily a good thing for people 65 and above. This is one of those topics that you have to be aware of in your mid-50s. You don't have to be a week away from your 65th birthday, because all of you out there that are watching this show in your 40s and 50s, you have moms and dads and grandma and grandpas. So excited to have a new national sponsor, Diane Daniels, national Medicare expert in the country. Next week, our guest is Miss Nancy Hetrick. Now, Nancy holds the record on the 62 Who Knew television show. It was her episode, was the only episode where we had more than 100,000 views, which for a little TV show / podcast is a staggering number. And what is her expertise? She is number one in the nation on gray divorce. People getting divorced 50 years old and above, which, by the way, that statistic has gone up between 2 and 3 times in the last 10, 15 years, doubled to tripled. Again, longer lifespans. People looking at each other in their 50s and 60s going, I haven't liked you in years. What am I still doing here? I still have another 20 years to go. So it changes. Now, is there custody battles over the children? No, the children are much older. But is there issues with the children? Is there deeper financial issues from homes owned, other annuities, stocks, bonds, portfolios, IRAs, 401ks? Gray divorce is a very serious topic, and we are going to be so happy to have Nancy Hetrick to deal with that many-faceted topic next Friday as well. And, you know, we're growing by leaps and bounds. Again, we're the successor to the 62 Who Knew television show that was on for almost 3 years. The podcast, this is our 9th or 10th episode, producer? 10th. We're growing by leaps and bounds, thanks to a lot of great people. My friends at Media Firestorm, our great producer here, Anthony at BlueBox Digital, great guests like Mr. Krooks. And we thank all of you for always tuning in. Tell your friends. Let me get my voice, my podcast voice here. Remember to like, share, and subscribe if you like this show. Did I do that good?
That was awesome.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you all very much, and we will see you next week. Take care.